showing up for the Sunday at Mike's edition of our live stream. We do them twice a week, Wednesday and Sunday. This is Sunday at Mike's. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I want to thank the regulars. I want to thank the new people. Thank you if you're going to tune into this not during the live stream, but in the rerun. Thank you so much for that as well. I always start out by saying that time is a valuable thing. Spending a little bit of your time with me is so greatly appreciated. So thank you so much. Hey, Scott, how you doing, sir? Always first in the house. I appreciate you, sir. Good to see you. Hope your week went fine. Hope you had a good weekend. I saw something amazing on YouTube today that just, just kind of blew my mind. I watch a lot of Japanese television because I like to keep up on my speaking and my hearing of Japanese and reading as well. And this one guy, not a music related thing at all, but this guy was going through a store and there was a Tama drum set that was a self-playing drum set. They had it all rigged up so that it played, and it was a full drum kit, it was a full Tama kit, floor tom, the 9. And it blew my mind because, you could really do a show without a drummer these days and still keep the drums. You don't have to use drums. You can actually have a set of drums up there on stage playing with you, and you don't need the drummer anymore. That really blew my mind. Michael Watson in the house. How you doing, Mr. Watson? So glad to see you. How you doing? Yeah, man, that was like, of course, my entire life I've been around. I play drums to a certain extent. I'm not brilliant, but I'm passable. And electronic drums. I have an electronic kind of deal behind me. But this was something different. This wasn't an electric drum kit. This was a acoustic drum kit that had been rigged up to play live. They had it was just amazing. And playing a pretty complex rock song accompanied along with it. And that just blew my mind. Blew my mind. Ben, hey, how you doing? Yeah. People are starting to show up here in the live stream, so I will continue on. In complete awe over it. So it really means that these days you could have a band, you don't need to worry about the drummer anymore. Thanks, mods. I appreciate that. Appreciate that, sir. And that's some people's dream because, people usually hate the drummer. Did I get along with my 2 drummers I've had? Yeah, half the time with half of them. So, yeah, that was something, boy. That's technology for you that's just mind-blowing. I really am curious as to how far that can go, using an acoustic drum kit to basically self-play itself, Something. Wow, impressive. What else? I have regular content this week. That if you have not checked that video out, please go to my regular content. Take a look at that, where I do a very, very brief review of the Greco-Rickenbacker that I got in. Strum it a little bit. I use this amp when I'm servicing work guitars, making sure that they're in tune and this, that, and the other. And I'm really impressed with this micro amp. I used it in a video as I was doing it. All my tools here, just setting it up, a guitar, getting it ready for sale, and using this amp. I am super impressed with this thing. The cleans on this are actually impressive. For such a tiny, itty-bitty little thing, I listened to the video on the playback and it sounded just fine. So, my screw you, I call it, I just call it the screw you amp. It's something. Hey, I appreciate that, Scott. You posting that up there, man. Thank you so much. If you guys get a chance, click that link that Scott so kindly put up and take a look at that review. Mostly listen to this little amp and just say to yourself, wow, that sounds pretty good for such a small little amp. It's a good amp for me to do my work on when I'm working on guitars. It's a great buy. I never thought that they could sound, because usually, what did I used to have? I used to have a clip-on amp that went on my side, and then I had a pig amp. And I always thought that these, if you guys know what a pig amp is, then you'll know. But I always thought that this was kind of similar to that, but no, completely monster. Sounds good. Not so great running any distortion through them, but for cleans, it's great. So there's that. I have talked in the past about my love for Prince and the work that he did when I was growing up. See, I was prime time for Prince. When 1999 came out, summer of 1982, I was just about to go into high school. And I had been playing piano for keyboards for a long time, taking formal lessons, but I was just starting to get into the guitar and the bass. And I've always been fascinated with that record. It was the record that came out prior to, of course, the Purple Rain soundtrack. But I always felt that album really truly is his best work. And that's 30 plus albums. That's a strong statement. But I always really felt that 1999 really captured him at a peak in his life, in his artistry, that really just summarized the era, the time, the vibe of the time. And any kind of story that I could get as a kid, we didn't have the internet, obviously. If you wanted to get information, usually you got it from a magazine like Rolling Stone or Guitar Player or something like that. Or maybe a snippet from an interview from very early days MTV type music channels like BET, Video Soul, or what was that one in LA? I forget. Richard Blade was the host, but Video One or something like that. But that was it. And I was fascinated with the recording techniques that Prince used in order, even at that stage of the game, because I was experimenting with 4-track. I got my first 4-track when I was about 12 or so, 13 or so. And I was really fascinated with the techniques that Prince used in order to achieve that sound. If you have a stereo and you have an album record player, and you put that album on and you play it through analog beans like that, you'll understand what I mean by the overall sound of it, the vibe of it. It's quite unique. Quite unique. Jess Magura, the drummer from CKY, has Prince's soundboard. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that. Welcome, Tracy. How you doing? Glad to have you here. Prince doing the Batman '89 soundtrack was awesome. Fun fact: squirrels swim on their backs to keep their nuts dry. It is a fun fact. I like that one. Hey, Maddie, how you doing, sir? Welcome. Recently on Vertex Effects channel here on YouTube, you can check it out. Jesse Johnson was interviewed. And I admire Jesse Johnson as well. He was the rhythm and lead guitar player, the only guitar player for the time. And I knew through stories that I heard that he had been instrumental and had writing credits on a lot of the Time songs. like The Bird, Jungle Love, stuff like that. And also, if you listen to the song 1999 and the initial opening, let's say the first 32 bars, that wah guitar that you hear in it, that's Jesse Johnson playing that guitar part. So he was a very in the know, insider kind of guy. And now that Prince has passed away, these guys who were reluctant to talk about it before, slowly starting to talk about things about that time, about Prince's recording equipment, even more importantly. People who were there is the only ones that I'll listen to. Everybody else speculating, it doesn't really matter to me. But a guy like Jesse who was there, and his thoughts and what he thought about the recording equipment that Prince was using. And his statement in that interview was basically, he says his equipment was shit. Which, when he said it, I was slightly taken aback. I said to myself, wow, okay, where is he going with this? But he kind of explained himself. He's, most of us when we're growing up, when we're kids, we imagine great music being recorded in multi-million-dollar recording studios. We see like the studios that I eventually got to work in, like Capitol Records Studio, and quite a few other places. In LA, that was what, when I walked into those rooms, I was like, yeah, this is what I always thought a recording studio was like. That was, basically just a pretty big deal. Jesse went through Prince's gear, each piece that he could remember, and he remembered well, and he really displayed something that I think is so important. I think it's really a message tonight that I'd like to give out to aspiring producers out there, or old heads like me who have been doing it for a long time, for 40 years. I think over 40 years. I think it's a message that we should always keep in mind. Because as musicians, as creators, as producers, and tonight I usually talk about gear and cars. Tonight I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about production. We're going to talk about music production tonight. And I think that we get caught up in what's new. I certainly was the generation that spanned between the old style of analog recording to the new style of digital recording. When I was doing remixes for Steve Keever at Motown Records, they introduced me to a very early version of Pro Tools. And we were syncing those up, learning how to sync those up and learning how to use those. So still in the major recording studios, we were using 24 track, 48 track, in the big studios, 2-inch tape. And being a generation that saw that transition, I can attest to the pros and cons of both mediums. I don't think that one is better than the other. I think that both have their strengths and their weaknesses. However, let's go back to old school. Let's talk about the old way that we used to record things on tape. And Jesse Johnson's revelation about Prince's studio was mind-blowing. Prince basically had a budget home studio setup. Okay? And yet, and we're going to go through the setup, what exactly each piece was, because he listed them very accurately, like I said. We'll talk about each piece. But I want to stress to you that his was an extreme budget recording, home recording studio set. It was in the basement of his house. He had a house by a lake in Minnesota, I believe. No, another part. But in any case, he had a house there on a lake. Down in the basement was his home studio. And it was a very budget studio. Yet, he recorded The album that I'm talking about, 1999, that I'm focusing in on tonight. But not only that, but great parts of many parts of Purple Rain were done in this budget studio on the equipment I'm about to describe to you. Don't get caught up in needing. I'll cut to the chase here. You you really don't need very much in order to cut great albums. And we're going to talk about that tonight. What do I got? Matty Two Hats. What drove me nuts is every time they talk about studio gear as beginner gear. I've been making music 30 years. Apparently, I'm still on beginner gear according to YouTube experts. Yeah, yeah, I agree, 1,000% on that, Matty. Because frankly speaking, I've always said this. You don't want any too many cooks in the kitchen. That's why I don't like a lot of people in the room when I'm recording. And I want to streamline that process as to be efficient and cost saving as possible. That's never changed in my 40 plus years of running home studios of various sizes. I've had big ones, I've had little ones. This one I would consider to be my medium-sized one. But still, key takeaway here tonight, guys, is about, it's not the equipment, it's really about your talent and how you use what it is that you have. So let's get into that a little bit. If Prince made iconic music with quote unquote bad gear, think about that. Now, according to Jesse Johnson, Prince's studio setup at the time looked something like this. His console was a Soundcraft 3B. A Soundcraft 3B is about the size, maybe a little bit less the size of this desk that I'm sitting at right now, and certainly about the depth, just to give you an idea of how small of a console that was. It was a budget mixing desk. It sure as hell wasn't an SSL or a Neve board. Okay, so you can look that up. Look up Soundcraft 3B if you want to take a look at an image of what that looked like. To my knowledge, I seem to recall that was like a 20-track board, something like that. Now, he did use API modules, and those API modules were going into a 16-track machine that actually recorded to a 2-inch tape. Now, that's significant because that essentially means that he was running a 16-track studio in his basement. And having the 2-inch tape, what that allowed him to do, and what he did do, was take that 2-inch that 2-inch tape reel to a 24-track studio like Sunset Sound, and use the rest of those available tracks minus SMPTE to fill in the rest of that composition. Now, again, the API modules, I think, were the key to that. A 16-track format is what I started out on. I started out working out of a 16-track studio every time I get 2 dimes together to work. And, that is really quite illuminating. Because I always thought that he had 24-track in his house with a nice 24-track board of some sort. No, he did not. His speakers were Uriel monitors. Now, I know these Uriel monitors because among black musicians, these monitors were super popular. Right? There was no, super, inner city studio that didn't have a set of these Uriel monitors. They had little light bulbs in them. And the light bulbs were to prevent from getting an overload in them. And But I know those, and it blows my mind to think that those were the studio monitors that Prince used in order to record all those albums with. Those, I know those things. Again, super cheap, not very expensive. One of the good things about them is, they had a very tight low to them, very clean mids and highs to them. That much I can't remember. But I truly do remember the monitors, and it just blows my mind. And again, his mixing environment was basic. It was an untreated room. He didn't put up any kind of floor. Well, he had carpets. I'm sure he had carpets, but there wasn't any kind of like sound design when it came to this room. It was just a room. That's not $1 million facility at all. It's really closer to a home studio than to Sunset Sound or Electric Ladyland, for example. Hendrix built himself a better studio than Prince had, you know, in Electric Ladyland. Not expensive equipment, even for that era at that time from 1980, I guess on, wasn't really phenomenal equipment at all. I got my exams today. Any motivation? Keep on studying. Don't ever give up. That's the best motivation in life. Just see what tomorrow brings. That's what keeps me going. Now, Soundcraft 3B was a small British-made mixer from the they started production in the late 1970s and early 1980s on those. It was not a high-end studio desk at all. It was actually considered truly to be more of a budget console, commonly used for broadcast applications or small recording studios, super small. It was really a broadcast desk. It had basic preamps in it and a very simple EQ, a 3-band EQ. Not the legendary tone shaping, stuff that you're going to, again, like I said, on a Neve or an SSL board. It's just not going to happen on that. And compared to an SSL or a Neve, the Soundcraft 3B was smaller, more limited, and far less expensive. Far, far, far less expensive. I had this had me, memories coming. I had a Trident 20-track board. That was my mixing board in my home studio when I first got out of university. And I started doing stuff for Motown and with Reggie Andrews as my manager. And I only had 8 tracks. I had an 8-track ADAT machine. And, and my monitors were a set of NS10Ms, Yamaha NS10Ms. The NS10Ms were the kind of the other de facto, if you could afford them. Well, there was a thing between these two Prince's speakers and the Urals and the NS10Ms in most of the inner city studios that I went to. But those were considered to be the pricier ones, the NS10Ms. But I used those for years until I switched to the Sonys that you can see here behind me about 15 years ago. So from the time that I was a teenager until about 15 years ago, I was using NS10Ms. But again, not very expensive monitors. So extremely not top tier gear room Prince running. But he made it work. He made it work. He focused on 3 things: performance, arrangement, and his editing. A lot of people have commented that Prince was a fantastic editor. I find that, quite frankly, to be my strength. I'm nowhere near a guitarist, drummer, keyboardist, or anything that he was. Again, I'm adequate in all those ranges, maybe a little bit above average, but still, my editing skills, I think, are on that level. And if you understand editing, sound, tone shaping, arrangement, performance, then pretty much, well, you could record it on anything and it will make a good recording. Those are the things that he focused on. Prince didn't have top tier gear. And other than relying on expensive equipment to do the heavy lifting, he did it himself. And one keyboard in the room as well. He had an Oberheim OBXA. And that was cut most of those, keyboard parts off. And not a lot of gear in that room. His Hohner Mad Cat. His amp, of course, I know, was Mesa Boogie, Mark III, Mark II, or Mark III, and a bass of some sort, a nondescript bass, and that was it. That was it. Less gear, I have found, generally tends to lead towards more creativity. I'm not sitting here reaching for this, that, or when I'm recording. And it's one of the reasons why I'm even tired of recording to Studio One that I've been doing for a decade. I want to get a 24-track hard disk recorder, which I will hopefully in the next few months, and switch over to that format. Because that's something that I don't have to make sure this is plugged in. I don't have to do all that. It just hit record and I'm ready to go. And that's how, because I have an idea and I want to sit down and I want to get it done. I don't want to be opening this up or setting up this plug-in or that. I just don't want to be bothered. So less equals more creativity. It's less distractions. He had to make decisions on the spot and commit to them. He didn't have the option of recording 30,000 takes and then picking the best one. No. Even with the solo for Little Red Corvette, he had Des Dickerson record 2 takes of that, and he took the first part of one take and the second part of the other, blended those two, spliced those two together, and made that solo. Again, a good editor. A good editor. Limited tracks makes better songwriting. If you have an unlimited number of tracks, then that's just scores of more bullshit that you'll put in there that really aren't necessary to the overall recording. I like the fact that I started on 4-track, then moved myself to 8-track, and then moved myself to 16, because during each step of that process, I had to learn how to work with what I had. And when I got the extra tracks, of course it was thrilling, but I could still work less as I moved up that scale. Even now, I will not record more than 24 tracks on any recording. I will not have, sure, you could have 48 going if you want to DAW, but I won't do it. Because only 16 tracks in Prince's situation and in situations I've been in really just allow for tight arrangements and fewer unnecessary overdubs. If you guys even know what an overdub is, if anybody out there knows what it means. A fast workflow means more music. Prince was one of the most prolific songwriters of the 20th century. And as his engineer explained, he had an issue in his brain where he could not turn the creativity off. There was no filter. So it was constantly going. So he had to really keep the workflow going. He really had to keep it as simplistic as possible. He wasn't making settings endlessly. He just got it down and moved on. got it down, got it to tape, and moved on. I've told this story before about the early modeling pedals that started to come out, late 80s. They go to Prince and they say, hey, we got this great machine here. It's got every fuzz, every wah, everything you want, all built in, every chorus, all built into this one device. And Prince said, where are the pedals? Well, you don't need pedals. You just set this up for this song and you hit here. And Prince said, get out of here. Because he didn't want to be screwing around with buttons. He wanted his pedal board in front of him. So he had them set up already the way he liked it. He wanted to get to work. Again, something that we should all take away from. Scott says, adding complexity never simplifies any process, especially recording, in my opinion. Richard Friend, I'm starting at the beginning, so starting about 15 minutes behind, but this is really interesting. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for tuning in. Glad to have you here. Maddie, when Prince toured my hometown here in Brisbane, Australia, he would play the entertainment center and after would be in a small club playing music until the club shut. Yes, those were his after hour. He was notorious for it because he never slept. And apparently neither did his band. So he would do these after show in small venues. And those were some of the best things because he would play other people's music. There's an after show where he's playing Missing You by the Rolling Stones, So, yeah. Mike, will you only bounce tracks together as a last resort or do you not mind stacking them all? Well, when I was recording rock bars, I was of the school to stack guitars. So I would play the same part twice or three times and stack that, in order to thick sound. Then I discovered that if you play two different, if you play the same part on two different guitars or slightly different variations of them, but you pan them left or right, you get a fuller and you get the same effect. When I'm doing so there's that. So that cut down on a lot of the bouncing. And in terms of recording guitars, sure. I've done takes where I like Prince because I said, well, Prince did it. And in the case of the Little Red Corvette solo, it's okay. Where I will splice, I'll do a couple of takes of a solo. If I like it all the way through, I'll print it. If I like this bit of this part and this bit of that, I will put them together. I will do that. But that's about it. I try to record as an authentic performance. And I just laid down some parts to two new tracks. I had one night to do it because that was the only night I had that bass guitar, that Fender. If you guys remember, for Japanese Fender, I wanted to use for those recordings. I had one night to do it. And I went through it a couple of passes just to see where I wanted to go. And then I did one take on both of those. I didn't do multiple takes. I did one take through those because I wanted to capture the feeling of performance. So, and again, that's what I mean about performance as well. Sorry for the digressions. Long answer there. Richard, thanks. Are just starting to get into things. I just don't want to miss a second. Just subbed and hit the bell. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. So, again, you got to ask yourself a couple of questions here. Performance is king, I was just saying. If you nail it, you don't need endless editing and mixing. And boy, could Prince nail it. Boy, could he nail it. That was his genius to me. The fact, something that I worked on, to have the entire arrangement done in your head, and you're really just laying it down at that point. You already know what you're going to do, just actually putting it down so everybody else can hear what's in here. And you want to nail it, and then you don't have to mess around in the mix. Do you really need 200 plugins when you're really only using, let's be honest, 6, maybe 8 of them? Something to think about. Versus skill. is what this conversation is tonight. Gear versus skill. Gear is not going to make you sound any better and worse than you already are. Prince himself used to say, the studio can make anybody sound like anything. And in the case of Milli Vanilli, that proved to be true, but only to a certain extent. Only to a certain extent. Even, the bubblegum groups like the Monkees had to bring in professional musicians, the LA Wrecking Crew, for example, in order to get those records made. There still had to be some talent there somewhere, is a pointed statement. And you don't want to become over-reliant on expensive gear. You don't need it. You want to find the cheapest gear to get the most out of as possible. You want to take Prince as your inspiration. You want to listen to 1999 and ask yourself, even with all your expenses, could you make a record like that? And if the answer is no, which is the answer for all of us, or else we would have, then we need to think about really what's important in our recording studios. The gear addiction trap. Many producers and musicians think they need the latest, best gear, but is that just an excuse? I've done overdubs on drums too, regarding the overdub question. For example, a lot of the Asanoki 1 and 2 drums, I played the drums on my drum, or I used loops, and then I would overdub live drums on top of those. I did that a lot. Because back in the day I used to overdub live drums over drum machines in order to get a live feel. And then I started overdubbing loops as well. So yeah, I've done overdubs, certainly, absolutely. But again, I did it as cheaply and as minimalistically as possible. How many plugins do you actually use? A lot of people buy hundreds of plugins, but they only use, like I said, 5 or 10 regularly. I got pissed off because the company that shall not be named blocked me from all the plugins that I paid for that I was to have a lifetime warranty on. So a double, salute to both of those, to that company for both of those lies. That first they stole me and then they lied to me about it. And it is another reason that I've been turned off from the whole DAW thing. Because when you have a hard disk recorder, it's already hardwired in there. You got what you got and you learn how to make it work. Would Prince have wasted time chasing the perfect year? No. If he had access to endless options that we have today, would he still been as prolific with his writing? No, because he wouldn't have gone for any of it. I guarantee you guys, as he grew and built Paisley Park, he built some fantastic recording rooms. But he could have made those records back in that old studio, just on less equipment. His fame and his fortune enabled him to afford more, but he had already proven that he could do it with far, 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 far less. So I put that out there, guys, really as an inspiration to producers, to the artists, to all you guys, when you're looking at your studio, again, let's get it down to the least amount of equipment that you can get the most performance out of. Are we buying gear because we need it? Do you think that it'll magically make us better? A lot of us are guilty of that. Let me catch up here. Most of my track vocals because I'm a horrible singer. I hear you. I hate to record a rapper. They only record 15 words in each take. Yeah. Well, real rapper, the real talented ones like Biggie Smalls, you could go on for a half hour just off the top of his head. So, I respect guys like him, the others not so much. Your thoughts on mixed bus processing? Well, I am very hesitant to talk about that because you're the crowd that says put a compressor on the mix bus. Some people do, some people don't. I do. Um, also, then from there, that seems to be the biggest controversy is whether you put a compressor on the bus or not when it comes down when you down the line when you get to mastering, So if that helps. I'm in Logic, or the only time I buy plugins is when they are free. Probably usually just use the stock ones or free UA ones. Yeah, I'm using most of the free ones now to record these basic tracks into Studio One. Once the 24 track hard disk recorder comes in, I'm transferring them into that, and then that's it. I'm not screwing with it anymore. Prince walked into Levon Music, Brunsville, Minnesota, dropped 10K on amps, and guitar owner was Pete Levon. Yeah. Yeah. Again, Prince was funny when it came to his amps. He would not let, Jesse pointed that out too, that Prince would not let anybody have a Mesa Boogie. You could not have his. He considered, that just again shows you how he felt so strongly that Mesa Boogie Mark II, I believe, yeah, Mark II, was really the secret sauce. I can understand that because I really think that vintage greenback, I couldn't live without that. His home studio was unreal. I'm a DJ, want to get into making beats, don't know where to start. Cool drum machine, right on a machine you can record to and do live stage work. Jesse Johnson said Prince Studio was a joke. He did. That it was a joke. But again, and I'm going through each part of that studio, and he was kind enough to give us a very accurate description of each one of those pieces. Some of them I'm familiar with because I'm from that era, or was at least in the museum era, it seems now, but I was there at that time. And I can say that, yeah, it was a joke. It was, but again, equipment versus skill. That's what tonight is about. It's about asking yourself and applying this lesson to yourself as a modern day producer and musician. He wouldn't have wasted time chasing the perfect gear. And he had access to, a lot of stuff. But he didn't use it. Some of the most legendary records were made on budget gear. I want to go through this before I wrap this up tonight because I want to remind you guys of other albums, other records that we are all familiar with that were done on quote-unquote budget gear. Rick Rubin's early Def Jam recordings, all the LL Cool J albums, all the Beastie Boy albums, and early hip-hop classics were cut on a 4-track recorder initially and then mixed to sent off to 16-track, 24-track. But they all started out a 4-track recorder. It wasn't $1 million studio. It was just raw talent and great performances to tape. Striking lightning in a bottle. But when you feel it and you got that vibe, sit down and get it to tape. It will come across in your performance when people listen to it. Bruce Springsteen's album Nebraska. That entire album was recorded on a Tascam 4-track cassette recorder. It was meant to be a demo, but it became one of his most iconic records. The entire Springsteen, excuse me, have a drink, your tongue is getting a little thick. The entire Nebraska album was done on a Tascam 4-track. You mic up the room correctly, drums, and there'll be bleed over anyway on everything. But if you do it right, yeah, absolutely. Meant to be a demo, but it became an album. Billie Eilish, I was talking about her in the last live stream. Um, it was recorded in a bedroom on a basic Pro Tools setup. Yet it won Album of the Year. So even on a basic Pro Tools setup at home, like she had, her and her brother had, um, Phineas, her brother Phineas, um, the bedroom, her sitting on the bed doing the vocals, not in a booth. You know, not like that session that I did with Diana Ross where we had to set up a silver teapot with silver tray with china right before her session. I was second engineer. Nothing like that. She was in her PJs and most of the time and recording, that album. You know, it's the mood, it's the vibe, it's the spirit of it. Sometimes I didn't like going to the big studios once I got, the ability to be able to go into them because they stifled my creativity. I always made sure that I knew everything that I was going to do before I went in because if not, you would just be wasting time and money. I always like small, intimate studios like this one. Like my studio in Japan, like my home studio in Singapore, like my home studios I had in various parts of LA when I was living there. I always like to keep it small and intimate because I felt that I could produce the best. The most important piece of gear you're going to be able to have is your creativity. That's your most important piece of gear. You can't buy that. Teapot is key to atmospheric ambience. Yeah, man. I generally don't like to tell my stories, but I think I told this one before, so it's not really dropping dimes. But yeah, she had that. She was making Irish coffees. She had a fifth of whiskey, uh, and we set the session up. I set that up as a second, set up the room, uh, set up lay down the SMPTE, and then we got the hell out. We were not allowed in there. Session was done. She was gone. I met her. Tracy Edmonds, Babyface's wife at that time, brought her into the room that I was in. And we were told how to be, hello, Miss Ross. Nice to meet you, Miss Ross. She was gone, went in there, and that entire bottle of whiskey was empty. And I said to myself, well, isn't that interesting? Anyway, Waves and Pro Tool kind of screw themselves. Yeah, I agree. JJ John, I agree with that. They screwed themselves. Waves screwed themselves with me. That's the company that shall not be named, by the way. So that's a true story with that recession. But anyway, that was in a big SSL room. Studer machines, the works. But I like those rooms, but I never felt as more comfortable in any of them as I do in a small situation like this one, or my other studios. So, a lot of albums. Rick Rubin's work, Springsteen, Billie Eilish, were recorded on what we would consider to be budget equipment. Not expensive stuff at all. I would say that Billie Eilish album, when we all fall asleep, is probably from, I don't know if she took an advance on that. Probably not. I don't know what she did. But from an economic standpoint, that was probably a killer in terms of profit because it didn't cost very much to put together. Now, Prince wasn't limited by his gear. Quite the contrary, he had mastered it. I know what this pedal board does. Each one of these pedals do and where they work together. I know how to get a certain sound of that. I don't have to screw around with anything. It's very quick for me to record guitar parts, rhythm parts, leads, whatever. You know, that's why I'm back to this, and I'm not using plugins. I just am using the Moore Radar as my faux, API going direct, and still achieving somewhat of a mic'd amp sound. That's an advantage. That's good for me because I don't have to waste time micing an amp. So that's a time saver. But I'm mastering all the gear that I have. Knowing what your gear can and cannot do is more powerful than buying the latest, greatest new thing. Would you rather have a $5,000 mic with no experience or a $100 mic with 10 years knowledge? I've pointed out before, I bought the mic in 1991, 92 at the Guitar Center in Hollywood. Guy said, we got these great mics in. It's so that the manufacturer's been rubbed off on here. I can't even tell you who made this. He said, this is a great mic, you should buy it. I bought it, and I've had it now for 3 decades. And I've used it for vocals, I've used it for recording amps. It's been a great all-around mic. Drums, all-around mic. I would this if somebody said they would give me a $5,000 mic and trade me for this one, I'd say no, because I know what this does. I know its pluses, I know its minuses, I know how to use it. And you can't really exchange that kind of experience. Because many legendary producers and engineers say they can make a hit on almost any kind of setup, and you should be able to. Because it's not about the tools, it's how you use them. Again, I like the fact that I went through the process. It's a shame that process doesn't exist anymore. When I went through the studio system at 16 years old and they put me in Black Bull Publishing, they gave us a 4-track machine and said, make it work. And you had to learn how to make it work. And then when you got lucky and you got to 8 tracks, then you're like, oh great, I got 4 extra tracks. But you could do with half. And then 16, then 24, and so on. That was a learning process that used to exist in order to teach you how to be a better arranger, how to get the best performance to tape as quickly as possible. This new generation where you have unlimited tracks, you kind of lose that. Could you record an entire song using just one mic and one DAW stock plug-in? And what would that plug-in be? Would it be an EQ? Would it be a compressor, a limiter? What would it be? A reverb? What would you use? So gear can help, but it's never really a substitute for knowledge, skill, and creativity. That's the truth of it. And Prince's studio story, that budget studio, that studio that Jesse Johnson was a joke, but taught him the lesson that it's not the gear, it's the person. Should kindness of that music, the magic of music is not in the equipment. It's in you. It's in you. So, you're a producer out there, my challenge to you this week is to make some amazing, only using the gear that you own, and taking maybe me up on that challenge of producing something using 4 tracks, 1 mic, and 1 plug-in, if you're using a DAW. And see what that's like. I'll give you a hint, you really want to use a reverb in that situation, unless you have other plans, but anyway. That would probably be your best pick. And I heard that Frank Zappa was a master editor. Yes, absolutely, another master editor. Editing has been the main thing that I have taught myself more than anything else in my music production process over my life is learning how to be a good editor, because it makes a difference and it makes things so much easier. So this week, make something amazing using only the gear that you have. No new purchases, no distractions, just make music. You when the Beatles got their Dream Complex studio, they couldn't use it at all. Moved into a different studio and redid theirs all over again. Yeah, again, it's like when you learn how to do with less, when you suddenly get more, that can really stifle your creativity. Weirdly enough. I own a Studer Bench. It's a museum quality piece now, man. 16 track, but it's time consuming. Yeah, I cut my teeth on those. I still use my 58 SMs. Yeah. Your thoughts on UAD's new DAW? No thoughts at all. Never. I don't know what it is. And as I said, I'm moving away from DAWs, so I'm not even really studying them. Nice crowd here tonight, Scott says. Everybody hit the like if you could. I appreciate hit those likes, guys. Hit the likes. Appreciate if you do so. And if you're new here and you really dig what I'm talking about on this channel, talking about gear, production, stuff that's practical and really built on the concept of I'm good. I'm good with what I got. I don't need more. I'm extremely fortunate to have the little that I have. Let me try to make the most out of that. Making the most out of the gear that you already have. I'm scaling down and down and down and down. My Uncle Carlton, a Hall of Fame blues guitarist, records on a Tascam 8-track. And he plays some of the stuff that he's doing, and it's brilliant. You wouldn't know it was recorded on an 8-track machine. And really, that'll tell you everything that you need to know about yourself, whether or not you are really a creative talent or you're just a hack, if you can pull that off. Again, being older, my generation, we were trained this way. And you got cut as you went up. If you couldn't make it on this level, bye-bye. If you did and you can move up to this level, then they did different than you could progress on. And then you got the keys. And then when I walked into my first 24-track SSL studio, I was not overwhelmed. I knew what everything was. I knew how everything basically worked. Later on, of course, over time, I would learn even more. But I had trained to get to that point. I feel what you record with amp synth, use the box, yeah. What happened on stage is gonna bring a lot up, yeah. Got you on that. With respect to your Jesse thoughts on thoughts on your favorite sampler. Use real gear. I got you, Johnny. My favorite sampler always has and always will be the MPC 60, the original one. Not the MPC 62, not the 3000, 4000, 10,000, no, the MPC. It's a great, great, great sampler. And if I were to ever get back into sampling again, that's what I would use. So, that's it. Just a message tonight. I talk about gear so much, and if you guys haven't seen it, again, I've got regular content. I'm doing a review of a pretty nice 80s Rickenbacker copy, so check out that video if you haven't seen that. Scott was kind enough to put the link. Scroll at the top of the chat here, you find the link there that Scott put. Appreciate that, Scott. I want to talk to the producers and musicians tonight. I want to talk about production tonight. I'm in the mindset this evening to discuss production. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. And just share that message with you guys. because that's where I'm going. I'm really scaling. I'm not, I'm not recording as much as I used to by far. It's not my gig anymore. But I will record for the rest of my life. I'm a creative individual when music flows through me. So I've got to put it down. But I'm really scaling down how I don't have to do that, expensively. And I'm confident with my skills enough that I know that I can still make a sellable product, a professional product. Again, using less. So there's that, guys. This is a message you can take or leave. We had quite for people show up here in the live stream tonight. I think the discussion of Prince always brings out the best people. Out of love and respect for him, that man, I always talk about people can teach you things, what to do and what not to do. Prince was that rare exception where he taught you a little bit of both. But even in both of those, the what to do's and what not to do's, they were spectacular lessons. Quite a phenomenal individual. We shall never see the likes of him. As he wrote in his own song, Sometimes It Snows in April, those kind of cars don't pass you every day. Well, that kind of car doesn't pass us every day. We will not see another like him, but if we can take anything away from him, that he didn't give a shit about having expensive equipment. He took the minimalist equipment that he grew up being poor, shuffled around, making what little he could scrape together work. And boy, did he make it work. And he taught us all, I get nervous with cats that have a lot of equipment and don't have a lot of records. I personally have a lot of equipment, but I got a lot of records. And I recorded them in small studios, 90% of the time, me playing most of the instruments. So, less is more. This is the other takeaway from tonight's discussion. All right, guys, tonight, watch my video discussing when he did Sunset in Cali, he needed anyone to help master, when he worked at Sunset Sound, he other than his engineers, he really didn't need anybody. That's it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to this live stream tonight. Prince's studio was a joke, according to Jesse Johnson, but really what he was trying to say there is the lesson that he learned that I want to expand on to you guys tonight. I hope you took it in stride. I hope you learned something from this discussion tonight. And I hope you tune in for the next live stream. I do appreciate each and every one of you always being here. I appreciate all the new people who are tuning in tonight watching. I want to invite each and every one of you into signing up to this channel, subscribing to this community, joining into these discussions that we have. We do it twice a week, Sunday and Wednesday, same time, same bat channel. So please always feel free to tune in. Thank you guys so much, and have a good week. Be good, you guys, and I will see you Wednesday. Take care, guys. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.